He sat alone at the corner table of the city's quietest diner, long after midnight, his untouched coffee gone cold. Outside, rain washed the streets clean of sound. The neon sign above flickered like a tired heartbeat, one pulse away from going dark. Ethan Cole didn't look like a man who ran half the city's real estate empire. Not tonight. His suit jacket was folded carelessly beside him, his tie undone, the weight of the world sitting on his shoulders like something invisible but suffocating. The last few months had chewed him up. Headlines, betrayal and engagement called off, a father gone, a company clawing at his sanity. He'd built an empire from scratch, but somewhere along the way, he'd lost the very thing that made him human. He ran a hand through his hair, stared at the rain hitting the glass, and whispered to no one, "Why does everything I touch fall apart?" That's when he noticed her, sitting by the window 2 booths away. She was trying to look invisible, head bowed over a steaming mug she probably couldn't afford, her coat too thin for the weather outside. She had a small backpack at her feet, the kind you carried when you didn't have a home. He didn't know why he kept looking. Maybe it was the way she held herself, proud, quiet, but exhausted, like she'd spent a lifetime holding everyone else up, and tonight there was no one left to hold her. When the waitress brought the check, he asked, "Could you send her dinner to my bill too?" The waitress gave him a look. Pity, curiosity, maybe both? "You sure?" He nodded. "Yeah, don't tell her who paid." He thought that would be the end of it. But when he stepped outside 10 minutes later, she was standing near his car, shivering under a broken umbrella. "Why'd you pay for my meal?" she asked. Her voice was soft but steady. He hesitated. "You looked like you needed it. I didn't ask for charity." He half smiled. "Then call it kindness." She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes catching the streetlight. They weren't defiant, just tired. "Nobody does things for free anymore," he exhaled, rubbing his forehead. "You're right, nobody does." He reached into his wallet, pulled out a folded bill, and before he even thought it through, said, "Here's $1,000. Her brow furrowed. "What?" He extended it toward her. "Take it, just hold my hand for a while." Oh, she froze. The rain dripped down her hair. Her lips parted in confusion. "Is this some kind of joke?" He shook his head. "No, I'm not asking for anything else. Just a hand to hold. For 5 minutes, that's all." She looked at him like he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. But in that moment, the loneliness in his eyes was louder than words. Finally, she stepped closer slowly, uncertainly, and took his hand. Her fingers were cold, rough around the edges, but real, alive. And for the first time in months, so was he. They stood there in silence under the broken umbrella as rain poured down around them. He didn't know her name. She didn't know his story. But somehow in that fragile space between strangers, the world stopped spinning for just a moment. When she let go, she didn't take the money. "Keep it," she said quietly. "You need it more than I do." And she walked away into the night. He thought that would be the last time he saw her. But fate had other plans. The next morning, Ethan dragged himself to his office, where the board waited with their polished smiles and sharpened knives. The papers on the table screamed betrayal. His partner, his fiancée, and his lawyer all colluding to push him out. He signed the documents without flinching. Let them have it. The company, the towers, the money. None of it mattered anymore. By the afternoon, he was driving aimlessly, ending up on the edge of town where life looked nothing like glass and chrome. He saw a small mechanic shop, old and half forgotten, with a hand-painted sign that read, "Ray's Auto, honest work, fair price." He stopped, not because his car was broken, but because something in him was. Inside, he found her again. She was kneeling beside a busted tire, grease on her hands, hair tied up in a loose braid. She looked up, surprised. "You again?" He blinked. "You work here?" "Work live, eat sometimes. Depends on the day," she said with a wry smile. He wanted to say something clever, but instead he just said, "I didn't get your name." "Clara," she said simply. "And you?" "Ethan." "Nice to meet you, Ethan." "Car trouble?" Just shook his head. "No, just life trouble." She laughed softly, leaning back on her heels. "You and half the planet." He watched her for a moment, the way she moved, the quiet determination in her eyes. She couldn't be more than 28, maybe younger, but she carried herself like someone who'd seen too much of the world to still believe in miracles. He looked around the shop. It was cluttered but clean, with old photographs taped to the wall. A little boy holding a baseball bat, a woman smiling beside an old truck. Clara caught him looking. "That was my brother," she said, "and my mom, before everything fell apart." "What happened?" She hesitated. "Mom got sick. Medical bills took the house. My brother moved in with our aunt. I stayed here. Figured someone had to keep things running." He nodded slowly. "You've been alone a while." She gave a small shrug. "You get used to it. He smiled sadly. No, you don't. Something passed between them then, an understanding, quiet but unmistakable. Over the next few days, Ethan kept coming back. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he just watched her work, listening to the hum of tools and the distant hum of the highway. She didn't ask why he was there, and he didn't offer an explanation. One afternoon, he found her sitting on the curb outside, staring at the sky. Ever feel like you're invisible? She asked suddenly. He sat beside her. Every day. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the loneliness behind his calm. You hide it well? So do you? Oh, she smiled faintly. Yeah, well. Can't afford to break down. People count on me. Who counts on you? She didn't answer, just stared out at the horizon. He wanted to reach out, to tell her that he understood, that beneath all the noise and the armor, they were the same kind of broken. Instead, he said quietly, I wasn't lying, you know. About what? The $1,000. She turned toward him, a hint of amusement in her eyes. You're still trying to pay me to hold your hand. He smiled, this time softer. No, I just wanted to thank you. You reminded me what real feels like. She studied him for a long moment, then said, You don't need to thank me. You just need to live again. It was that night he realized how much she'd changed him. He couldn't explain it, but ever since he met Clara, the noise inside him had quieted. He found himself fixing small things. A call to his mother's old friend, a donation to a local shelter, even cooking for the first time in years. He wasn't trying to be anyone's hero. He was just trying to remember who he used to be. And somewhere in the middle of all that, he began to smile again. A week later, Clara didn't show up at the shop. When Ethan went to check, the door was locked. A note was taped to the window, closed for repairs. He asked around until someone told him she'd collapsed at work the night before. By the time he reached the small clinic on the south side, visiting hours were almost over. He found her in a narrow room hooked up to IVs, looking pale but peaceful. You shouldn't be here, she said weakly. I had to be, he replied. She smiled faintly. Wes, I owe you one now. Oh, you don't owe me anything. He hesitated. What happened? She looked away. Didn't eat much, got dizzy? Guess I pushed too hard. Ethan sat beside her, guilt twisting in his chest. You should have told me. She shrugged. You've got your own battles. Mine aren't your problem. He shook his head. That's where you're wrong. She looked at him, eyes glimmering under the dim hospital light. Why do you care so much? He didn't know how to answer. Maybe because she saw him when no one else did. Maybe because she reminded him what it meant to feel. He reached into his coat, took out the same folded bill, the $1,000, and placed it gently on her bedside table. She frowned. What's that for? He smiled softly. This time it's not payment. It's a promise. You're not alone anymore. As she stared at him for a long time before tears welled up. You can't save everyone, Ethan. He reached for her hand. Maybe not. But I can start with you. The night she left the hospital, Ethan was waiting outside in the rain, holding the same broken umbrella she had used the night they met. He didn't say a word, just opened it over her as she stepped out, shivering slightly in her thin sweater. You don't have to walk me home, she said, forcing a small smile. I know, he replied softly. But I want to. They walked in silence down the cracked sidewalk, puddles glowing under streetlights. The world seemed quieter when they were together, like even the city respected the weight of their unspoken pain. When they reached her small apartment above the old auto shop, she hesitated at the door. You can come in if you want. It's not much. Inside it was simple. A small couch, a flickering lamp, the smell of coffee and engine oil. There were no decorations, no pictures, just survival. Ethan looked around quietly, taking it all in. You live here alone? He asked. Yeah. Used to be my dad's place before he left. Now it's just me and the noise from the shop below. He nodded. It's peaceful. She laughed under her breath. That's one word for it. He looked at her then, really looked. The faint scars on her hands, the exhaustion in her eyes, the way she held herself like someone always expecting the next storm. Claire, he said quietly, you ever think about what you'd do if things were different? She hesitated, then shrugged. I used to dream big. I wanted to study design. Maybe open a place of my own someday. But dreams don't pay rent. You know? Maybe not, he said softly. But sometimes they're the only thing that keeps us alive. She looked at him, really looked. And what keeps you alive, Ethan? He paused. You. She froze, heart skipping. Don't say that. It's true, he whispered. Before you, I was done. I had money, power, everything people chase when I felt nothing. Then you held my hand, and for the first time, I felt human again. Her eyes shimmered, a single tear slipping free. You don't even know me. He smiled faintly. Maybe not. But I know what it feels like to lose yourself, and I know I don't want to lose you." She didn't respond. She just looked down, twisting her fingers nervously. "You can't build something on broken pieces, Ethan." He reached out, gently tilting her chin up. "Maybe two broken people can make something whole." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain outside softened into a lullaby, and the silence between them became something warm, something healing. Weeks passed, and Ethan started showing up at the shop every morning. He fixed tires, handed tools, even learned how to change oil. The millionaire who once signed billion-dollar contracts now spent his days in grease, stained jeans, laughing, sweating, and living. Clara teased him about his clumsy hands and his perfect hair, but secretly she loved having him there. The shop that once echoed with emptiness now carried the sound of laughter. They ate lunch together every day, sandwiches, cheap coffee, sometimes just leftovers from the diner. But to Ethan, it felt like a feast, and little by little, something in Clara began to change too. She started smiling again, dreaming again, trusting again. But happiness, as she knew too well, never stayed long. One evening, as they were closing the shop, a black car pulled up. Two men in suits stepped out, one of them holding a briefcase. "Mr. Cole," one said, "we need to talk." Clara looked at Ethan, confused. Ethan sighed. "They're from my old company." The man continued. "We've been trying to reach you. The board reversed the decision. The merger failed without your signature. The company's bleeding money. They want you back." Clara turned to him slowly. "You're that Ethan Cole?" He looked down, ashamed. "Yeah. I was hoping you'd never have to know." She stared at him, speechless. "You're a CEO, a billionaire, and you've been here pretending to be, what, a mechanic?" "I wasn't pretending," he said softly. "I just wanted to be someone real. With you I was." But she stepped back, hurt flashing across her face. "You lied to me. Clara, please." "No, Ethan. You bought me dinner, offered me $1,000, and made me feel like I was just another pity project. I thought we were equals. You are," he said, voice breaking. "You're more than that. You're the reason I'm standing here, the reason I'm even breathing again." She shook her head, eyes glistening. "You should go. Your world isn't mine." He hesitated, wanting to fight, wanting to explain. But one look at her trembling hands told him she wasn't ready, so he nodded slowly and walked away. The days that followed felt like a lifetime. Ethan returned to the corporate world, to glass offices and endless meetings, but none of it felt right anymore. Every deal, every number, every handshake. It all felt empty without her. He'd stare out the window of his penthouse, wondering if she was okay, if the shop was still open, if she ever thought about him. He tried to focus, to move on, but every night he found himself driving back toward that little mechanic shop, parking across the street just to see the light flicker inside. She was there, always working late, always alone. One night, he saw the closed sign still hanging past midnight. Panic gripped him. He ran across the street, pounded on the door, but no one answered. He found her inside, sitting on the floor, her hands covering her face. The walls were half bare, the shelves empty. "Clara, what happened?" he whispered. She looked up, tears streaking her face. "They're taking the shop. Rent went up, I can't afford to stay." He knelt beside her. "Then I'll help." "No," she said sharply. "I don't want your money. Clara, it's not about money. It's about you. About us." She shook her head. "There is no us, Ethan. You belong to a world I can't touch, and I'm tired of being reminded of what I'll never have." He closed his eyes, the pain cutting deep. "You think I care about any of that? I'd trade every dollar I own just to see you smile again." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the truth in his eyes. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you're the only one who ever saw me when I was invisible." But tears filled her eyes again, but this time they weren't from anger. She reached out, her hand trembling, and took his. The same way she had that first night. Only this time he didn't offer her money. He offered her everything. Months passed. Together they rebuilt the shop, bigger, brighter, busier than before. Ethan quietly invested in it under Clara's name, never taking credit, never trying to own it. He worked beside her every day, learning, laughing, living like he had never lived before. The sign outside changed. Clara and Ethan's auto and design. She finally opened her small design studio next door, sketching custom interiors for clients who believed in her talent. They didn't have a fancy wedding or grand announcements. Their story wasn't built on diamonds or spotlights. It was built on the quiet kind of love that heals slowly, honestly, beautifully. Sometimes when the nights grew cold and the rain returned, they'd sit outside the shop under that same broken umbrella, fingers intertwined, the neon light reflecting off the puddles. And whenever Ethan would think back to that night in the diner, when he'd said those words, Here's 1,000 Ru, just hold my hand. He'd smile. Because what started as a moment of loneliness became the greatest decision of his life. He didn't need $1,000 to feel alive anymore. He just needed her hand in his. And as the camera fades, her voice, soft, trembling, real, whispers, "You didn't buy my hand, Ethan, you held my heart."